If the wind was at your back and you were going a certain direction, you wouldn't turn around and tell the wind, hey, pick it up, we need to go faster, would you? Or maybe you would. Either way, the wind isn't going to go faster, it's a force of nature, so you're going to have to kind of go with the flow. When we talk about surrendering, there are three things that we're doing that we can release or surrender to give into it, to kind of go with whatever's at our advantage already. When we talk about certain elements like the wind or even our family or friends or even our circumstances, it may seem dire, it may seem like something that's entirely not working at the time. But the idea is that if you hone in on what's not working, it will continue to not work. That's just how I have experienced things in my life, and also in these three things that we're going to talk about. And really quickly as a recap, the three things that we'll go into: one is resistance, two is going with the flow, and then the last part is leaving space for the magic to happen. And so we'll start with resistance first, and I just want you to really understand the word surrender before we even get into this. It's not about submit, it's not about concede, it's not about compromise, which compromise can and usually is a good thing if you understand the word well enough, but it's not any of those things. Surrendering is simply the ability to let go when you need to let go. And a lot of us don't really tap into letting go and surrendering until it's well after the time that we need to. It's always a perfect time, though. That's the trick of surrendering. It is always a perfect time to surrender. And so the first thing we'll talk about is resistance. I was playing football in high school, and I remember watching this running back on ESPN, and he was talking to the science ESPN lab about, well, this is how I get out of tackles. And he said, I just don't force it. I'm like a cannonball through the O-line, and all of a sudden I get hit by somebody. I roll with it. I go with them. And so it's in a sense like judo. And this guy was talking about essentially not doing the thing as a kid that we all thought football was, which was by just, resisting everything and forcing your way through the offensive line and going towards the touchdown end zone. And it's like you're basically bending everything at your own will, and everything is doing is essentially moving because you're moving. And instead of moving with it, you're moving against it. You're moving against everything. And this running back said the opposite. He said, actually, I just let somebody hit me, and then I move with their hit. And two things he said that come from that: one, he gains more yards, and then two, he gets less injuries. And so when we talk about resistance, there are so many things that we engage in that are acts of resistance to what's actually going on. And it could be as simple as somebody pulling in front of you in traffic and you being like, oh, God. We're resisting what's actually happening. Hundreds of cars lining up on a road as if we have some control, as if the choices we made leading up to that point in time, we weren't already going to be in that position. So the idea of having a reaction, we can talk about response and reaction in another video, but having a reaction to it that doesn't serve you, or reacting to something to maybe change the conditions or the scenario, is something already out of your control. And you trying to change it even further is going to exacerbate the situation. It's going to increase the frustration, the anger, the annoyance, whatever's going on. And that is only going to make your scenario worse and pull you further from your desired outcome. So when we resist, we're looking at a situation not for what it is. And we're also not giving ourselves grace to be who we can be and kind of really, really get towards that ceiling of potential and maybe push past it. We're not getting towards our desired outcome. We're letting the process steer priority over the outcome. You need to detach from how it's going to go. You need to detach from what the outcome will be and hold your desired reality and understand that by you surrendering and decreasing resistance, you're going to allow things to fall into place. You're going to allow a lot of things to work for you as opposed to against you. And when you change the way that you are looking at everything, everything is going to change the way it looks at you. Shout out Wayne Dyer. So the idea is that you have to notice when you're in a mode of resistance and try your darndest to get out of it. Well, that actually is a paradox, because when you're in a mode of resistance, you're not trying to get out of it. For me, what I usually do is I observe the resistance and then I kind of laugh at it. I'm like, oh, silly Toussaint. You really think that you're going to change the traffic? You really think these cars on 94 West are going to be moving faster because you said so? Or because you feel a certain way? When we align with our desired outcome, when we align with, as Abraham Hicks would say, the vortex, or we're in the vortex, traffic isn't going to even matter. It's not going to be a big deal. Serving people in the service industry, I could tell you which people were living their lives, even if they had a ton of money or no money, were living their lives within their desired outcome or aligned with it or not. If one little thing was off, outburst. If a big thing was off, oh, hey man, I asked for Mazithra cheese and not spaghetti sauce. I'll eat this, but it would be so cool if you could just replace it. Oh, okay, great. Yeah, this is at the old spaghetti factory, mind you. And that type of go with the flow, that surrendering, you're not going to change the kitchen. There's like hundreds of people sitting here. It's just not going to change. So we have that. We've established that. Notice when you're in resistance, and even start to notice the world outside of you. Where is resistance happening? Where are the pockets of it? Really take note of it. And then, honest to godly, it's really something that becomes comical, because it's not a big deal. Don't sweat the small stuff. To quote the first book that my big brother from the Big Brothers and Big Sisters program gave to me, and I couldn't understand it in the beginning. I was like, what do you mean don't sweat the small stuff? I sweat all the stuff. We'll get into that in another video. The second thing is to go with the flow. And when you stop resisting and you start going with the flow, you'll start to feel probably a little uncomfortable, maybe a lot uncomfortable. And this happened with me recently. I'm on a program right now monitoring what I eat and monitoring how much I work out. And in the beginning, I was like, it was not something that I sat in any comfort with at all. I wasn't used to it. And if anything, my train tracks were just like, nope, this is how we do things. I guess they want us to speed it up and just eat less. And that was far from it. And it was to change the way that we approach what we put in our bodies and change the way that we approach movement. And in doing that, it's an emotional outcome and process. And so the first 2 weeks of this program, I'm in the third week right now, I unknowingly did not go with the flow. And so it was unconscious incompetence. And I essentially was locked into my own tracks thinking, well, this thing will come along with me at some point in time. And a lot of that was just resistance. It was me engaging in same old foods I was eating and not giving this thing a shot or try to see what would happen. It's not saying goodbye to foods. It's not forever. It's essentially saying, let's try something new, see what works. And the first 2 weeks, because I didn't develop any flow state, I was in resistance. And once I started to give up the resistance, once I started like being aware of where I was resisting, or saying, that doesn't matter, I'll just have that bag of chips, it'll be fine. Or saying, I'll eat that food that I know isn't great for me. Once I stopped that and I replaced it with other things, or just stopped it altogether, a flow occurred. And I could see there being conscious competence overcoming the unconscious incompetence. So I knew what I was doing, or the conscious incompetence, I knew what I was doing at a certain point. That was the second stage. Unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence. if that all makes sense. So I unknowingly was not following the regimen. Then I was knowingly not following the regimen. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to go with this thing that's telling me this thing to do. And I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to add any more anger or emotion to it that's not already there. It's not going to serve me, and it's going to just keep me in that perpetual cycle of it. So we're just going to let go of that, and we're just going to go with the flow and see what happens. And the flow's been happening, and yeah, my upper body is in a lot of pain, but but outside of that, there has been an immense amount of rewards, and I get a new perspective on things. So when you go with the flow, it's the second stage of basically transcending resistance. You're getting above it, and now you're looking at you're seeing the field, all right? You're seeing everything. And the next thing after that is leaving room or space or grace, whatever you want to call it, for the magic to happen. And it's what a lot of musicians do, or jazz musicians that I've seen do. And they'll essentially say, let's see what happens. Let's give it a try. Or, yeah, let me fall back and listen. Let's find out. And it's not forcing an outcome. It's not trying to outline or predicate a future. It's not essentially pushing against anything. It's saying, I'm going to let go and I'm going to see what happens. And actually, I'm kind of excited about it. That is huge. And I ended up doing that last week. I did an event called Dinner with Strangers. Good words. I did a Dinner with Strangers. I don't even know what to call it. We'll do a separate video on this too. We've developed a lot of tangents so far, but it's an event where you meet up with 8 to 10 strangers at a dinner that's curated, and all the food is put together amazingly, and there's wines, NA wines, cocktails, NA cocktails, all this stuff, and it's in this beautifully curated space by this woman named Jess that puts it all together. And then you have a conversation where you draw questions. And I had an idea of what I was going to do or what was going to happen, and the shirt I was going to wear, all these things. And a lot of things collapsed. The shirt that I brought had a stain on it, and I was like, well, I'm not wearing this in New York. And so that was that. And then I think something else went perceivably sideways to the point that I had to let go. And the next step that I took was, well, I'm just going to see what the magic is that happens here. Because I'm not in control here. I have my desired outcome. I'm here in Brooklyn. We're about to kick it and get into this Dinner with Strangers. It's going to be great. Can't wait. And we'll see what happens. And because before all of that, I had sat with my desired outcome of I wanted to go to this thing. How do I get there? How do I put all the pieces together? And then once I lined everything up, let go. Let it go. So surrendering is so powerful because it's the first step to you being, or to my understanding, you being in the lane. I always think of Finding Nemo when they go in the jet stream, it's the first step to being in the jet stream and you getting to exactly where you want to be and letting go of how it's going to happen and when it's going to happen and who it's going to happen with. It's the what and why. What is your why? What is your cause? Really what we're talking about is detaching from the effect and just engaging with the cause. Because you can't have an effect create an effect, right? So we're talking about just staying in your cause, staying lined up, staying with who you are. You said what you said, you standing on it. It's literally the saying, standing on business. I'm not moving anywhere. I'm not forcing anything. I'm not resisting anything. I'm not doing whatever. I'm just letting the wind push at my back, and we're going to go forward and essentially see where this desired outcome takes us. So really dig into surrendering this week or the next few days and see how it provides for you. Not submission, not concession, not conceding might be different than concession. Not conceding, not compromise, which we'll get into another time, but it's surrendering to your desired outcome, letting it be. See what happens.